Okay, so I'm going to make a film review here, and the film is Bobby. I'm aware there's a Bollywood film also with this title, so not to be confused with that Bollywood film. Um, Basically, this is quite an unusual film in that it takes place entirely within 24 hours. Um, it's a very, in my opinion, it's a very powerful film and a very, very underrated film. That's partly why I want to discuss it. I've just watched it actually. It's among my top 10 films, probably. Um, but it didn't quite get the critical acclaim, in my opinion, it deserves. So basically, this film, and like I say with all my reviews, there will definitely be spoilers here. This film basically details the night at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles during the California Democratic primary in 1968 when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And rather than focusing on the man himself, it focuses on some of the people who were in the hotel that night. I remember when I went to see this, I was the only person in the cinema screen, and I came out thinking, "What the hell? I have just watched an incredible film, and no one else was there." So, to me, it's perplexing that it didn't get more critical acclaim. One of the critiques of it was that it, it tried too hard to get the 1960s culture. Um, and I guess it was also accused of being preachy at times. Um, it's definitely a film that's very political, even though the actual candidate himself, I mean, there's no actor playing Bobby Kennedy, there's only archive footage, and the film is interspersed with his speeches, campaigning, and so on. Incidentally, before I review the film, a quick question to my American viewers, if you know the answer. You may not know the answer, but it's an open question. In 1968, Eugene McCarthy got more popular votes than any other Democratic candidate in the primaries. Bobby Kennedy was obviously assassinated. He was second to McCarthy in the popular vote, though he beat McCarthy in California. Now, I understand it was a winner take all situation. What I don't understand is how Hubert Humphrey became the party nominee, even though he wasn't involved in the primary process. A bit confused by that. Nothing to do with this film, really, but it's just an open question. So this is an all-star cast. It's directed by Emilio Estevez, who has a role in the film himself. Lawrence Fishburne, Heather Graham, Anthony Hopkins, Helen Hunt, Lindsay Lohan, William H. Macy, Demi Moore, Sharon Stone, Elijah Wood, Joshua Jackson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, um, Lawrence Fishburne. The list goes on. It's really an all-star cast with this film. Um, and basically, some of the background stories is an elderly doorman and his friend, um, uh, a sort of diva singer who's an alcoholic, and her put upon husband, a beautician, and her manager husband. He's the manager of the hotel, who's having an affair. A lot of this was obviously for artistic license. Um, the African American chef and Mexican or Hispanic American busboys. Um, and the film plays on some of the racial tensions going on there. Um, Two young campaigners who end up getting stoned, basically. Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays their friend. Um, a young woman who marries her friend, played by Lindsay Lohan. The friend is Elijah Wood, to stop him going to Vietnam. So there's a lot of background stories going on, and I've probably even forgotten some of them. A lot of background stories. Oh yeah, Christian Slater plays a racist catering manager. Um, so there's a lot of background stories going on in this film, and it's very, very intriguing because it's like the only other film I've seen doing that was Love Actually, which is a very different sort of film. That's a romantic comedy, but it's a very, very interesting take on it because the director chose not to actually cast anyone as Robert Kennedy. It's a very unusual film. The soundtrack to me is very powerful. The soundtrack was compiled by Mark Isham. It includes tracks by Simon and Garfunkel, sort of 60s tracks. There's one scene which is very memorable where, like I say, the two young campaigners end up getting stoned and they're kind of hallucinating on the LSD. The druggie, by the way, the drug dealer is Ashton Kutcher. And they're hallucinating on the LSD and they're worried about going to Vietnam and they see this big Richard Nixon kind of waving to a crowd, then the bombing of North Vietnam. And it's a very intelligent film, in my opinion. I do understand the criticism, but to me that doesn't detract from it. I think it's one of the very few films I can honestly say I got pretty emotional at the end. The assassination scene itself is very dramatic. Again, it doesn't show Kennedy himself, but shows, it implies him shaking hands with people, and just like the historic photograph, it shows the the young busboy kind of giving him the rosaries. Of course, RFK was a devout Catholic, and it's just a very powerful film, and I think it's hugely underrated. Oh, there's also a character who plays a Czechoslovak reporter. She really wants to get an interview with RFK, but Joshua Jackson, who's one of the campaign managers, is very reluctant to give her a pass because he's concerned that she would make it look like Senator Kennedy was sympathizing with a communist reporter. She emphasizes she's not communist, she's a socialist. So it's really a thinking film without being too slow. I don't think it's a slow film. It's roughly 2 hours, but it's not a slow moving film. It's very watchable. So honestly, I really do think it's a powerful film, and I can't find much ground for criticizing it at all. I do think it's underrated. It didn't get any Academy Award nods at all, from what I can see. Um, so yeah, check it out, Bobby. Um, and I think it's really, last night I was talking about The Butler. Likewise, this is a film that really offers a glimpse into the really chaotic year that was 1968. It is probably a film with a very, very Democrat or liberal slant. Although, a quick word on that, I don't know about RFK, but there's an interesting new book by one Ira Stool, which has been quoted online, and it's about how JFK was actually pretty conservative. This is something that would surprise people both in the US and abroad. He's always seen as a sort of big spending liberal, but actually many of JFK's positions could be seen in today's context as politically conservative. So that's very interesting. Um, there you have it. I just think it's a very powerful film, and I think Emilio Estevez deserves a big nod for his directional work in this. Yeah, that's it. Bobby, 2006. Check it out. Um, I just find it really moving when they combine the playing The Sound of Silence by Simon Garfunkel with people watching Kennedy's speech. Just a really and the catchline is 22 lives linked by a moment the world would never forget. So check it out. That's Bobby. Um, and Never Going to Break My Faith by Aretha Franklin is a very good closing song, and that kind of shows a montage of the Kennedy family. It's yeah, really interesting film. Um, they do have a guy playing Sirhan Sirhan who was of course charged with the assassination. Very dramatic scene when he actually shoots Kennedy, but um, yeah, check it out. There's not much more I can say really. I give this film about 8 out of 10. Um, if it loses any points, I suppose there are times when it can seem a little preachy, like the director's pushing his own political views through a little bit. So slight aspects of that, but it's kind of like I suppose you could call it a very politically correct film in that it shows pretty much everyone, but it's a very very diverse range of in terms of the cast. On the other hand, that's realistic. That's the sort of Kennedy reached out to so many people. So anyway, check it out, Bobby by Emilio Estevez.